Good afternoon and thank you for joining me today. My name is Stasiuk and today I will be presenting my MSc Counselling research project, which I have titled, Is It All Grist for the Mill? Rethinking Resilience from the Outside In. This is a study that looks to re-examine how we conceptualise and support resilience in trainee counsellors, specifically whether it is shaped by external factors, which I chose to be social support or financial security. This project emerged not only from academic interest, but from my own lived observations within my cohort, in my supervision and across client work. What began as a curiosity evolved into a critical reflection of how external environments may shape, limit, or facilitate trainees' development. Before we begin, we'll have a look at the overview. So this presentation will follow the structure of my dissertation. I'll begin with the rationale and the theoretical foundations of the study, then move through the literature, research design, as well as the findings, before ending on the implications, potential for future research, and of course, the conclusion. Let's start with the introduction. The profession of counselling asks us to engage deeply with others' pain, while managing our own emotional responses. This is key to counselling, and for those in training, the demand of this role is compounded by the academic pressures, the unexpected personal transformation, and often a sense of uncertainty or vulnerability that is intertwined with a counselling course. Resilience itself is widely accepted as essential for counsellors. However, the dominant disclosure tends to frame resilience as a personal quality, something we are expected to have or develop on our own. This can place quite a lot of pressure on trainees to cope silently and may leave little space to question the role of the systems around them. This study emerged from my own experience as a trainee, but also from my observations of my peers who, despite being committed and capable, often felt overwhelmed. It prompted me and my team to ask a more systematic question. What role do training environments play in either supporting or undermining development of resilience? Here we'll look at definitions of resilience. Resilience can be understood through several theoretical lenses. Trait-based models described it as a stable internal characteristic which can be helpful for measurement but risks overlooking the influences of context, where developmental models take a broader view, suggesting that resilience unfolds across time and through experience, often shaped by adversity and adaptation. Ecological models go further still. These suggest that resilience does not belong solely to the individual, but emerges through their interactions with their environment. This is the one I prefer. In other words, it is not just about internal strength, but about whether someone is resourced, supported, and held in meaningful ways. This research was grounded in the ecological and development perspectives. These frameworks allowed me to see resilience not as a fixed trait, but something fluid, rational, and shaped by systems we inhabit. So here, the question, why resilience matters in training. Training to become a counsellor is about enriching and exposing. Trainees are asked to work therapeutically with real-life clients, often while reflecting on their own histories and beliefs. There is a strong emphasis on insight and self-awareness, but not always an equal emphasis on support or containment. The literature shows that resilient trainees are more likely to persist in the profession of counselling and are better equipped to navigate the emotional labour of therapeutic work. Yet, The responsibilities of cultivating resilience is often positioned with the individual trainee, with little discussion about the role of the training institution or broader ecological systems. This imbalance was a core motivation of my study. I wanted to explore not only whether support and financial stability influences resilience, but also what it means ethically and practically to shift the focus from the individual to the system. So what do we know? Across the wider literature, social support and financial security are consistently identified as protective factors of well-being. Social support has been linked to lower rates of burnout and greater emotional stability, while financial security is often associated with distress, shame, dropout risk and dropout risk in trainee contexts. However, much of this research comes from the medical and educational settings. There is relatively little focus exploring these factors in a counselling setup, especially with trainees. Given the emotional intensity and rational demands of the profession, I felt it was important to examine whether these external resources play a measurable role in shaping resilience during training. Let's take a minute and look at the literature review that we have here. Social support is well established as a buffer against emotional strain. Studies across healthcare and social work settings show that those who feel supported tend to cope better and recover more quickly from setbacks. Financial strain, on the other hand, has been linked to reduced cognitive performance, difficult engaging in training, and a sense of being othered from peers. It can also compound shame and isolation, especially when unacknowledged with training institutions. What struck me during the literature review was how little work had been done to connect these ideas directly to counselling, especially in the UK. This study aims to bridge that gap. Let's take a look at the aims and hypotheses. The aims of this research was to investigate whether perceived social support and financial security were positively correlated with resilience in trainee counsellors. Two hypotheses were developed. The first was that social support would be positively associated with resilience. And then the second hypothesis that states there will be a significant positive relationship between financial security and resilience. These were informed by existing literature, but also by anecdotal reflections from myself and my peers when we were investigating this. Here's the methodology that I used in my dissertation. This study used a cross-sectional survey design where we gathered 50 UK-based counselling trainee participants. They completed a number of socio-demographic questions along with 3 different measures. 1, the brief resilience scale. 2nd, the multidimensional scale of perceived social support. And lastly, a single item measure of perceived financial security. Participants themselves were recruited through the Bangor University Sonar system, social media, as well as emails out to a number of other UK counselling courses. Ethical approval was secured prior to data collection, and data was collected anonymously through an online platform on Psych Toolkit. While this approach allowed for efficiency in data collection, it also introduced a number of limitations, particularly in the way that the financial security was assessed. This we can have a look at later. Here is the data collection, which, as I said, was hosted on Psych Toolkit. Data itself was cleaned and analysed through a Spearman's row, and given that there was a non-normal distribution on the BRS results, had a significant impact on our data. I approached this analysis with caution and curiosity itself. While the hypotheses were clear, I was also open to what the data might reveal about the complexities of resilience as a concept and as a lived experience. Here are my key findings. Unexpectedly, neither hypothesis was supported. There were no statistically significant relationships between resilience and perceived social support, nor was there significance between resilience and perceived financial security. These null findings challenged some of my assumptions that I had brought to this research, but it also opened a space for a more nuanced interpretation, particularly in light of the ecological model. Interestingly, I found that the BRS scores were not normally distributed, where I believe that this had a knock-on effect with the rest of the results, as our BRS scale was the key for this data collection. From this, we'll go on to the discussion, where after finding no significance, there could be several explanations to have a look at. Firstly, there may be a ceiling effect happening here. Participants generally reported high levels of social support, which reduced the range of the scores and limited potential for correlation. Secondly, the MSPSS scale focuses solely on support from family, friends and partners, which sounds great. However, this doesn't actually capture the professional side of counselling, specifically things like group supervision, personal supervision, PPD, which is what we do here at Bangor University, or general more chats with peers around counselling contexts, which may be more central to resilience in this context. Third is cultural norms in the UK. This could be influencing how support is perceived or reported. There may be a reluctance to acknowledge need or a preference to appear self-contained. In this study, this was not something that was specifically looked at. Finally, financial insecurity was widespread. Most participants reported some level of strain, which may have reduced variability and statistical power. In effect, it was not that financial insecurity had no impact, but that it may have been felt universally across the peer groups. Going deeper into the discussion, we'll look at theoretical insights. These results support the idea that resilience is highly context dependent. The absence of significant correlations does not mean that social or financial support is irrelevant. Rather, it suggests that we may need more nuanced tools to measure how trainees experience and access support in real time. It also reinforces the idea that resilience is shaped not only by what is available, but how meaningfully and accessible those supports are. So what are the implications from this study? One of the big ones that I saw was training institutions must take it seriously, that their role in shaping their students' resilience. This includes things like emotionally responsive supervision, normalising the need for support and embedding things like self-reflection as a protective and valued part of the training process. Further to this, financial aid must be accessible and stigma-free and responsive to the realities of a trainee's life. As we all know, training to become a counsellor is really expensive. Resilience cannot be expected in isolation. It must be fostered in community, practice and policy. Let's quickly look at the limitations and, more importantly, recommendations for future research. Originally, we'd hoped for 250 participants, but due to the time constraints of this study, we managed to get 50, which I was quite pleased with. The financial measures that we also used were a little bit simplistic and may have missed important nuances, and the design was cross-sectional, so no conclusion can be drawn about the causality. More importantly, for future research, we might explore resilience longitudinally or through mixed methods that capture not only what people report, but how they narrate and make sense of their own experience. So really and truly, some interviews and further components would be really helpful in exploring this wealth of information around resilience from an external standpoint. The big important thing is counselling support systems. It's one of the strongest themes emerging informally was the importance of reflective practice, whether through supervision, journaling, or peer or informal peer spaces. Trainees consistently spoke about the value of time and space to process. This may be one of the most effective and overlooked contributions for resilience. Not all support is measurable, but it can be deeply protective. So here we are, the conclusion of this study. Well, this research does not deny the value of internal strength. I know a lot of psychology research is always focused on the internal, and the key for this study was to really question the idea of those assumptions, to look at the external. Is resilience something that we must develop alone? Because I don't believe it. From doing this course and having this experience and interacting with my peers, I can see from my own self that maybe not. But by taking an ecological perspective, it becomes clear that resilience emerges not just through challenge, but through containment, through reflection, and through environments that make space for vulnerability. So, this is the question. Is it all grist for the mill? Perhaps it is, but only if the mill includes rest, containment, and room for the self to stretch without fear of collapse, to have that support from others and those around. And this is a support that I feel personally I have found and gained from this course, where there is peer support, there is supervision, and there is a team around looking to help. Thank you so much for listening, and I really do hope you enjoyed this. I welcome any reflections or questions that you may have around resilience from the external viewpoint. So please, if you do have any questions or any comments, please can you comment in the comment section below, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you. Just so you're aware, here's my references for what you might want to see them. Bye everyone.